And welcome again to the Intentional Currency Podcast. So excited to have a very special guest with us today. I'm here with Sofia Haq, who is both an investor and community builder. I met you actually. She's the founder of Muslim Women Professionals in the States, one of the fastest growing nonprofits for Muslim women. And so excited to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. I know we have so many things on the line to talk about today, and so very
Yes.
excited for the conversation.
Yes, likewise.
So, to get started, I wanted to kind of ask you a little bit of, or to kind of introduce what it is exactly that you do and how you got into that role.
So yeah, I'm a senior program manager at Slauson Co. We are an investment firm based in Los Angeles. We invest in early stage companies, so those at the pre-seed and seed stage in VC. My role getting into venture capital was not something that I ever expected would happen, if I'm being completely honest. I did not know what venture capital was until probably like 2019. And that was just hearing the word or the phrase venture capital. And I remember just thinking, what is this? I've never heard of it. And, as somebody who came from a middle income background, but then we became low income at a certain point, working in finance and even just finance as a whole was not something that I ever saw myself doing. To me, to be honest, it was almost like that's reserved for white men, white women. It's not something that I would ever do. And so to be working in this space is really crazy, but I feel very fortunate that I am because I think that spaces like venture capital have the opportunity to really shift communities for the better. It gives the opportunity to invest in founders who want to go out, build, and give back to their communities as well. And so working in venture capital has been incredible, but it was never something that I ever anticipated I would do. I initially was working in the retail luxury goods space. I was on the sales and operations side. My goal initially from the get-go was I want to be the CEO of a major luxury brand. At that time, it was like a Chanel or an Yves Saint Laurent. I really love luxury fashion. I still do. I find it incredibly interesting. But after a few years, we had the Muslim ban implemented here in the United States. And I was kind of at a crossroads at work. And I just remember thinking, my community is really going through it. I have friends who have been the victims of hate crimes. At my local masjid, somebody went around and started, breaking the windows of cars. And I remember I was actually supposed to go to the mosque, that night, and I ended up not doing that. And so, it was just something that I felt like I really needed to do. And I almost asked myself, like, is this something I can actually do? And I remember telling myself, if it's going to be somebody to do it, it's going to be me. And so I ended up leaving my company, did not have a plan, like many founders, did not have a plan, but definitely had a goal. And for about a few years, I just really dove into, learning as much about entrepreneurship as I could, listening to podcasts, reading books. I was a part of pre-MBA program at UCLA Anderson School of Management. So leveraging any knowledge there that I could about entrepreneurship. And then in 2020, got accepted into an accelerator called Grade 110 here in LA for founders. And I learned so much through that accelerator. It was almost like an accelerated MBA for entrepreneurs. And that's where I found my incredible mentor, Mickey Reynolds, who is now actually my boss at Slauson, full circle moment, and had a mentor named Austin Clemens, who is managing partner at our firm. And so met them, learned about venture capital, and just kind of thought, this is what I want to do. Like, this is what my purpose, I feel like, has been all along, to be able to be in the space where I can, invest back into my community using other people's money and being able to show financial returns. And so Mickey was just such an incredible mentor for me. Austin has always been somebody that I look up to. And fast forward, after working in venture capital for a few years, I get the opportunity to work at Slauson Co., which is a firm that Austin, started with his partner, AJ Rowland, and Mickey is my boss. She is the head of program. So it just feels like a full circle moment. And I feel very fortunate that I'm able to work in venture capital, but also work for a firm whose values I align with. VC is not, a one size fits all type of thing, right? Like, each firm is incredibly different. And for me, I did not want to compromise my values in working in venture capital. And so I feel very fortunate that I'm working at a firm with people who truly care about their communities. And the firm itself is based in South LA. I'm not out here. I'm not going to really build my office in Beverly Hills or, let's say Culver City, because that's where people usually go. I'm going to build it back in my community, and I'm going to make my community better. So that way I can hopefully inspire the next generation of investors, entrepreneurs, etc.
Wow. I think it's so interesting because, I teach investing and I think investing is already a world that a lot of Muslim people, it's new for them. A lot of women who come into my programs are the first woman in their family who's investing or buying stocks.
Right.
And I think venture capital is almost the next level.
Yeah.
People hear that and I think they just think, okay, that's something that's never going to be accessible to me. I'm curious to hear, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but
Yeah.
what does your day to day look like? Like, what is the world of venture capital and how does that relate to the Muslim community or somebody who is maybe an entrepreneur? Like, how can they connect with the venture capital world?
That's a great question. So, in the role that I'm in, it is definitely a mix of a lot of different things. And I like it that way. I feel like I am somebody who likes to do different things, but I'm a senior program manager. That's my title, but it includes so many different things. So, investing is actually a part of that. So, for the Friends and Family Accelerator, which I work on with my boss, Mickey, when people apply, we're doing like due diligence right away. And due diligence, for those who don't know, is like you're basically conducting research to make sure, like, is this actually legit? Is this going to, potentially be a company that we should, do further due diligence on? And so right when we start getting those applications, which we received this year, almost 1,000 applications for about 11 spots, which is about a 1%, if I'm thinking of that right, about a 1% acceptance rate. We were like, right from the get-go, it was like, as applications were coming in, we were doing due diligence on all the companies. We look at every single application, we read every single application, and we just go through every single one meticulously, like looking at every single detail, every single answer. Is this going to be something that we could potentially invest in? And then we collaborate with the investment team where they will do interviews with the founders. And then, basically our goal is to get to those 10 or 11 companies. And so that's, specifically around, when the accelerator is, before the accelerator even starts. And then from there, you actually have to build out the accelerator. So that's actually, creating the programming for the accelerator, creating the structure for the accelerator, creating all the operations internally. What resource are we going to give these founders? What documents do they need to have prepared? All these different things is what we build out on the programs team. And then not just that, but it's like once the accelerator actually launches, then you're having to maintain everything. And for us, we kind of serve as like, again, investors, but also again on the program/platform side of really holding them accountable and setting metrics for them to ensure that they are successful, because it's our responsibility to basically make sure that they are able to successfully fundraise when it's time to actually go out and fundraise. And so we've implemented different parts to the accelerator to ensure that we're holding them accountable, that they know what goals that they need to meet, so they have structure. And for a lot of them, it's like so helpful, because it's like, not only are we holding them accountable, but we're their biggest cheerleaders. It's like, okay, do you have what you need to be able to reach this goal? If not, what do you need from us? Send us your asks. We will share it with our community. We'll share it with the team. We'll share it with SCON, which is our operator network that we have within Slauson Co. And so for us, it's really about being there every step of the way to support them. And obviously, as an entrepreneur, so many things come up. I mean, I'm a founder myself. So many things come up that you don't even think of, initially. And so we have to really be kind of like on deck for them every step of the way to make sure that they have what they need. And in terms of like how this ties back to the Muslim community, I think that, to your point, venture capital is not a very popular thing, right? A lot of people are not really taught about VC. In our community, still, it's very much like, go become a doctor, go become a nurse, go become an engineer. But I actually think that that's something that we should be doing anymore. I think we should really be focusing on the strengths of the individuals within our community, because we could be missing out on some really incredibly talented entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurship has the ability, as I mentioned earlier, to be able to impact not just the economy, but also, these communities and shape them for the better. So at Slauson Co. in particular, one of our mottos is your lived experience is your competitive advantage, which is something that I find so beautiful, because it's basically saying, everything you've been through, good or bad, has shaped you to be where you are today. And every single one of those things have allowed you to now be where you are today, but they also give you the ability to see things in a way that many people would not be able to see. And so for us, it's really about leaning into that. And so for Muslims in particular, what I would love to see is more Muslims, getting into the entrepreneurship space. We actually are hosting an event in a few weeks called Slauson Summer School, where we selected out of a pool of quite a few applicants, a few entrepreneurs to come in for like a whole full day of programming and education. And I actually had a Muslim woman reach out to me saying, I got accepted and I just saw your profile and I saw that you worked there. And this just makes me so excited to see another Muslim woman in this space. Can we grab coffee? And I said, absolutely. And so things like that get me very excited because, again, we are leaning into the community. We are seeing the strengths of them and we are leveraging our resources to be able to help them. So that way they have the tools that they need to be able to go out and build. And I do think that even me, by being a Muslim woman in this space who is very vocal about my identity, that in itself, I hope, will inspire Muslim women, Muslim men to be like, I can do it as well. And it's my job to be able to support those folks and to be able to show them, it's not about, coming into the space and thinking like, yeah, I'm that person, I'm the go-to Muslim and that's it. No, it's about us building community in this space because as Muslims, we are being targeted, politically, I mean, everywhere. And so it's really important for us to band together in whatever ways that we can, leverage whatever opportunities and resources we have to be able to support one another so that hopefully we can see more success.
See, I love the point that you made about just how, these traditional roles of going into engineering or
Mhm,
in
mhm.
medicine, and it's pushed so strongly in our community. And I think it's great to go after these higher incomes, but I think that really it's to the detriment of our unique capacity as individuals.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
so it's so interesting to kind of push more, I think, especially Muslim women into roles that really highlight their individuality and their unique skills. I
Yeah.
think that kind of makes for such a richer society.
Absolutely. Yes. And I mean, if you look just right now, the landscape right now, especially within beauty and retail in particular, and again, that was initially my background, the influence that Muslim women have to have so many of these luxury brands wanting to suddenly make abayas and hijabs, especially before Ramadan, because they know of the power of the Muslim woman as a consumer. And if you look at, even, with everything that has been happening in the past year and a half, companies like Huda Beauty are soaring in terms of their sales. And it's because, our community has become a lot more intentional about who we buy from. And so, even for me, I'm like, not every product may work on me, but every product that does, I'm going to buy it from her because I know that my values align with hers and I want to see her succeed. And in return, if you look at what she's done, she's donating to so many incredible nonprofit organizations that are helping Palestinians in particular, on the ground. And so it's a win-win for our community. If we support one another, it will come back full circle because those who are in the positions of power, like Huda, are going to use whatever, success that she has to give back to the community. And so that's where I urge people again to become entrepreneurs, right? And then again, give back and then also be very supportive of those who are entrepreneurs in our community to ensure that they continue to be successful and hopefully can create a shift within their respective industries.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you brought up the beauty because I think that's such a big part of our role as Muslim women, especially as we're evolving. And now we have these careers and we're more educated and
Mhm.
ultimately we have access to a lot more money, which
Right.
gives us that responsibility of now that we have this money, what are we doing with it? How are we investing it and how are we spending it? And I'm really curious for you. You kind of mentioned that you came from middle class background and now you're working sort of in the VC space. You're a founder. How has your relationship with money evolved as your career has kind of grown?
Oh my God, big yikes. So big yikes. So to your point, we were middle income. At a certain point, my father was put on disability, and so we became low income. And that was actually, quite a obviously shift. We went from, being comfortable to now paycheck by paycheck. I mean, it was very, very hard. And it was even, more devastating because you have this parent who was working and all of a sudden their health issues are becoming so bad that you're just seeing them deteriorate over time. And especially for my father, who was always somebody who was helping, his family, his friends get jobs, and he would bring them into his company, give them a job if they needed it, to kind of see him now in a position where he couldn't work. It was like work is what fueled him in so many ways. Like, and for a lot of us culturally, it's like, yeah, that's what we're kind of taught, right? It's like, okay, for specifically a man, it's like your job to provide, right? And so because he could not do that, it really impacted, him. And it was really hard to see that as his daughter. And then my mother had always been working. My mother is still working and she's in her 60s, and she really showed me at a very young age the power of financial independence. And, though sometimes she was like, yeah, sometimes I wish I didn't have to work because I wanted to be with my kids. It was like, no, but I love the ability to have my own money. And so that was really, powerful to see her in that role. And so when my father ended up, not being able to work, my mom was the one providing for us. And that was really hard on her. And again, we became low income, and that was just a really hard time for us. Really impacted us. Again, I didn't really know how to handle money. Nobody really taught me that. I came from a family still where it was like, credit cards, don't do it. You're in college, you're going to spend the money, don't do it. Now I'm almost like, man, like either you could have, I missed out on some really cool opportunities, but that really impacts you as a child, seeing that and being very much like the power of money and also what happens when you don't have it. And so, like other folks, early on, like, again, I didn't have that foundation. And so, yes, you spend more than you actually have and all of that. But at a certain point a few years ago, I remember going to therapy. I love my therapist, and she kind of told me, she goes, Sophia, you work in venture capital, right? Each company has like board of directors. The same way that those companies have board of directors, you need to have a board of directors for your life. You have me as your therapist. You need a financial advisor. You need a good accountant. You need a good lawyer. You need all these things. Because for me, it was very much like, I know what my goals are and it's going to come with a lot. And I remember her telling me, like, I know you don't want to spend the money because, again, you've come from a background where, again, when you have money, you don't know what to do with it. And then you get really excited because you have it and like all of that. But she was like, you need to be very intentional because this is where you start building your legacy almost, and you want to build generational wealth. And so I took her advice, and I actually met somebody in a fellowship that I did for VC who is focused on the Latino community in particular. And so she's also a financial advisor. And so I scheduled a session with her. And man, I broke down actually. I was like crying. And it was because so much of what we were talking about was like the relationship with money. And it's like what it can do to you when you don't have it and what it can do to your parents when you don't have it. But, she's incredible. And, she really was like, Sophia, you're going to be okay. Like, you just got to set these things up just like you would like a project management tool at work. It's so easy. And so I'm very fortunate for her because now I'm very much in a place where it's like, as soon as, the paycheck comes in, it goes in very different places for different things. And, I'm very, very intentional about my money, but also very intentional about making sure I have a good relationship with it. Because when I hopefully have a family of my own, I don't want my children to be afraid of it. I want them to be responsible. I want them to know money has a lot of power to do really incredible things if you know how to do it correctly. And so for me, again, like I am like a lot of folks where it's like, you've seen the good, you've seen the bad. But again, it's like, to my therapist's point, like you have to get to a point where you take initiative and you're like, I am not going to be in a position where I was, maybe when I was younger, where it's like I didn't know what to do. I'm going to be proactive, not reactive. And I'm going to make sure that I'm very intentional with it. And so now working in venture capital, again, where it's like we talk about millions, like it's nothing. It's not uncomfortable for me because it's like, okay, this is very exciting, if anything, now for me. And my goal is like, I want to be able to make a lot of money so that way I can do a lot with it and hopefully build, generational wealth.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that advice of having a board of directors and having a
Yeah.
financial advisor on your team.
Yes.
Because ultimately, there's no shame around not knowing how to manage your own money in the sense that we weren't taught it. And if you're in a completely different industry, it's not something that you would know about. And
Right.
so, in any other aspect of our life, if you're struggling with health, you would go see an expert.
Exactly.
So, finances is no different. There's no shame around it. You don't have to be an expert.
Absolutely.
If you're struggling, then you go and you see the expert and you get some help.
And, even within our community, so many women are maybe the first in their family to work. I'm not, right? Because my mother has, been working her whole life. But, so many women are like, oh, what do I do with all this money? And, is it mine? Like, where do I put it? All of those things. But it's like money has so much power and it has a power to be able to create shifts for you and your future families. And so, there is no better day than today or tomorrow to be able to start that. And it is the best investment you will make. And, my goal was always like, I want to make money while I'm sleeping. That was always my goal. And I want to have multiple streams of revenue. That was also my goal. Because again, seeing my parents have to navigate what they went through, where again, they were also limited in the education that they had around money, both of them being immigrants. For me, it was almost like, you learn from that, right? And you're like, my parents did the best that they could. And now I have access to a lot more opportunities. I cannot just stand by and be like, oh, I'm just going to let whatever happen. No, I'm going to take initiative because I want to make sure that I'm responsible and that I'm making sure that my money is where it needs to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, having gone through that, of
Yeah.
having spoken with a financial advisor, and now you have your paycheck, it's organized, it goes in different areas, you know where
Mhm.
it's going, it's growing. What advice would you give to women who are very much at the beginning of their careers and maybe discovering that they don't have the healthiest relationship with money? What are the first steps, or what kind of advice would you give to them?
That's a great question. I think, telling them that it's okay that you feel the way that you feel because clearly you've gone through something that has made you feel this way. And now, just like anything else, like, when you're going through something personally and you go to therapy, or, like you said, when you are not feeling well, you go to a doctor. Now it's very much like, okay, it's just time to find some resources and get educated. Now, what I would tell them is like, you don't need to spend so much money upfront to be able to get access to education. Now you have platforms like yours, you have platforms on YouTube, you have so much accessibility. I mean, there's so many podcasts on it. And actually that's how I initially started. I was like, okay, I'm going to see how much I can learn. But at a certain point, it was like, okay, well, now I actually need to take action. Now I actually need to have somebody in my corner who's like, you got to get rid of this. You got to put more money here. Somebody that could tell me what to do. And what I would just tell them is, yes, sometimes it can seem like a lot of money, but sometimes you need to invest money to get money back, just like you would in many different spaces within finance, right? You put money in, and the goal is, okay, it's going to generate more returns and higher returns for me ultimately. So, what I would just tell them is, leverage as much education as you can, but at a certain point, realize that you have to take that with a grain of salt because, some of the podcasts you're listening to, you're are being led by women who maybe never experienced what you experience, or maybe they're not women of color, or maybe they're not Muslim, so they don't know all the different parts of, your journey. And so at a certain point, find somebody that you trust who you feel will be able to help you. And just remember that the earlier that you do it, the better. But if you end up doing it, later, let's say you're in your 30s like I am now, it's okay too. But just start. Starting is the best thing. And remember that it will benefit you so much more in the long run because you will have protection over everything and you will be able to help yourself, help your family, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like that's such a key point, right? Is that, and especially you working in VC, it's so important as Muslim women to really push to have access to more capital
Absolutely.
because ultimately having access to more money really amplifies our voices and ultimately it amplifies our values.
Yep.
And so you run MWP. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you do and how that's helping amplify the voices of Muslim women?
Yeah, of course. So I started MWP back in 2018. As I mentioned, it was, after I left my job in luxury fashion. And initially, my goal was just I want a community where Muslim women can get together, talk about their experiences in their careers, talk about the things that they're going through, and just be able to have this like safe space for them where, they're around other Muslim women. And then it just kind of, took off on its own, really. And so now we've become, as you mentioned, one of the fastest growing nonprofit organizations for Muslim women in the world. Not only do we have these spaces of community, but we also are spearheading events all over the country, from New York to SF to LA. We have virtual events to be able to reach Muslim women in spaces where we don't have chapters yet, which have been really incredibly successful. And through those virtual events, we have focused on so many different topics, from like your spiritual rights in the workplace to how to invest, which we did a few events with you, which we were so grateful. We're also doing another finance event very soon. And so, really educating Muslim women on areas that they may not have thought about initially, but knowing and reminding them that this is all part of your journey as a Muslim woman professional, right? Like, you need to know what your rights are in the workplace. You need to, know what's going on with your money, and you need to be very strategic about where you put it. And then finally, really building content around the community. And so before us, there wasn't really a lot of spaces where people were building resources for the community. And so we built resources like how to request Eid off, which have now been done by other organizations kind of following our suit. How to explain Ramadan to your coworkers, like things like that never existed. And in my mind, I'm just like, my gosh, like, I wish I had this, back when I was starting off in my career, but it's okay because we're building it. And I feel like that was always the goal. It was like, we want to be able to speak to our community in ways that they understand by providing them with resources, content, events, etc., that will allow them to be able to embrace their identities, but also understand, like, wait, this is tailored to me. I don't need to go in and advocate, for more, events tailored to my identity. No, because MWP is actually doing it for me. And so that was always the goal. And now, we've been growing so much, and I feel so fortunate because impact was always the most important thing for me. It was always about, impacting Muslim women all over the world. And that has been, such an amazing thing for us.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. And I've been following you guys for years as well. And it's
Thank you.
something that's been such a huge need in our community, especially as Muslim women professionals, which is
Yeah.
kind of a newer sphere, especially in the West. And so all of those resources are things that ultimately somebody has to build. And it's been amazing to see what your team has been able to put together.
Thank you.
The last but not least question, what would be the best way for somebody to get in touch with you? You mentioned that, someone had mentioned if they wanted to have a coffee with you, or what's the best way for someone to reach out?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is a great way to reach out to me. You can just message me. And then if you want to follow me, I also am actually launching a TikTok, which I just started, to talk more about my journey in venture capital and as a founder. And it's Sofia Haq, SOFIAHAQ. And then on LinkedIn as well, SOFIAHAQ. So those would probably be the two best ways to get in touch with me. And yeah, a lot of what I'm trying to do now that I'm actually in this space and have been in this space for a few years, is really talk about my journey, because I've had so many Muslim women reach out to me. Even just this week, I have like calls with like 3 different, Muslim entrepreneurs who are like, I want to run a business idea by you. And I'm like, okay, and again, some of these people I don't know, and some of them I do, but I've always been that person that wants to support the community. And that actually ties into some of the work that I'm doing now, which is where I am actually working with a lot of businesses one-on-one on my own to kind of get them where they need to be. So that way they can be in a good spot to be able to apply to an accelerator like Friends and Family. And for a lot of them, they'd have absolutely no education or no understanding of what venture capital is like. And so kind of giving them a little bit more of like the fundamentals, so that way they can go out and be more successful. So if you are somebody who's starting a business, or you want to run it by me, or you're looking for somebody to kind of support you and consult with you, feel free to reach out to me as well.
Such an incredible resource. And again, it's something that in our community, especially, it's so hard to have access to that. And
Yeah,
so I think
absolutely.
it's absolutely incredible what you're doing, both through MWP and through your work in venture capital.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for all of your work. And thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom and all of your experience with us today. And inshallah, I'm so excited to be collaborating again, inshallah, in the
Thank you
future
so
one day.
much. Likewise.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you.